their practice talks a lot of the evolving urbanism of their city, Ahmedabad. We also are very lucky to have them because they've been very lucky to recently have a child. So I'd like to welcome Melissa Smith and Sachin Bandukwala and little Ira onto stage, our youngest speaker, may I say.
Thanks for the introduction, Madhav. Thank you for inviting us here. We're really happy to have made it. We weren't sure if we could come, but we thought everything's working well. Is it? We thought that everything's working well. I might move a little more on stage than I'm used to. So we're going to go for it. I'm going to start by reading. There was a curator's note for this talk looking at photography and architecture and its relationship. And so we thought about that, and we wanted to do something that related to that. So I'm going to start by reading the brief that we gave ourselves, and then we'll jump into a very quickly moving set of slides. When we stumble upon a good but imperfectly executed idea working beautifully, we question the conventional approach to perfection. When we see the spirit of occupation overtaking building elements, we question the architecture. When we see materials decaying while their details still elegantly hold them together, we celebrate the architecture. As a practice, we look for opportunity in the accidental. The unpredictable particularities of each context and process inspire and guide our decisions. Local skill set and client program form part of the limits we study. Others' ingenious ideas provide impetus for simple innovations and big clues on how to extend the life of perpetually decaying materials, which begin to weather even as they sit on site. People's occupation of their spaces posits a critique for new arrangements. All this captured in photographic memory reminds us both of the danger and excitement of change. The ideas are there, the execution imperfect, yet here the imperfection works like a mutation. It propels transformation, highlighting new aspects of place and of architecture, revealing discoveries that can be leveraged. Now we'll look at the memory of imperfect, occupied, and decaying spaces as active agents in our process of making. Thank you, Ira.
Okay, so just to say a little bit about the presentation format, what we have tried to do is there are certain set of images that we have categorized as imperfect, occupied, or decaying places. They do not exactly fall into those categories, but there is a sense of these categories. Within that, we've also tried to place some of our work. We are not sure whether we are exactly matching these ideas, but this is where a lot of our understanding, observations at micro and macro scales come. So I'm going to start. So to talk about imperfection, this is an image in Beijing. You can see it's one of those pile foundation. The idea is that a lot of these images, if you see in the actual place, it's a beautiful old town, old part of Beijing, and then you suddenly come across this a site that just totally seems not what you expected. And somehow there is something imperfect about it, but if you still see it as an image and as an act of what has happened, there is rhythm and order. Something similar in Udaipur, different building blocks doing different kind of things, showing imperfect, diverse buildings. If you see if somebody asked us to do it, we would never be able to think of this one column as a shade supporting column. But we came across this, and we thought it was doing the job. In the beautiful town of Udaipur, where there's a lot of stone carving and all of that, we found this cement jali, equally striking and proudly used, And if you see the staircase, which once it was working perfectly fine, but now if you see it requires support and railing. That's That's a perfect sliding door. Um, that's inside out minaret. If you see, which is not very common. Then we came across this. I mean, again, the idea of supporting the way this foundation has been created. From the I section, we found this structure, which is the brackets are supported by railway tracks. And the strange kind of rhythm, which also appeared in these images, that I could not find what was happening inside that would prompt the designers or maker why they should create this sort of rhythm in the facade, but it did. And everything is old about this, except for those 3 shiny GI shutters. And so one of our attempt here is that the balcony, one of the balcony which was falling apart, we tried to restore that and did some small office interior, which kind of was an interesting challenge in the context. So that's the same balcony that you saw earlier. This is the balcony, a little bit of interior of that. From that, if you see this house in the hills, it's got elements from different buildings, but we were wondering, whether this is working together or not. And some of those ideas kind of come to our mind when we try to design something. So this is one of our recent projects. It was an old row house that we converted into a lawyer's office. It's a very basic 2 parallel walls and some steel structure that we added and created this canopy. If you see these houses, the one on the left painted by Geru, and for all of us who know Geru, it does not last the rain, and in Bikaner that year it rained, and the kind of image that it created, when we were walking through the street, it somehow created this texture, that removed the newness of the paint and create this homogeneous character that worked with the patchy facades of the stone buildings and the cows. If you know more about Bikaner, these are the kind of spectacular facades that they have on the streets, but if you see behind, it's something totally in contrast. This is a very interesting dhaba. Everything is perfectly normal about this except for the floor. And when we visited, it was in the summer, and we realized the effectiveness of this floor. They just water it once in a while, and it cools down. Another local material use which is innovative and something that is not usually prescribed. So these are bricks. Bricks are commonly and available and in good quality in Punjab, and so we found another dhaba where they had created this ribbed ceiling, staircase with notches. One of our project where we tried those similar kind of notches. Again, another case of imperfection, the way the steps are made and the way water supply is created. We found this beautiful example of drain with one of the juice walas, probably the cleanest lari, at the end of the day or once in a while. We found this robotic arm that crushes these sesame seeds to get the oils out. And similar sort of hands-on approach by this guy to create his shelter. It's a bunga with use of plastic as tying thing. So we tried, this is one of our projects where we tried making the staircase, it's a staircase that's going in the basement, and we were supporting this on this twisted pipe, and we made these exciting drawings, these plans, sections, and elevation and all that, and trying to explain to the guys how the dimensions are working, how they're supposed to read, and somehow there was nobody who could twist the pipe like this, and so we ended up creating something that is probably even better, but something maybe more appropriate. This is example of how there is a simple rectangle floor plan, but then you have this imperfect roof and this um, facade of this building where same kind of materials, but the way staircases are done, it breaks into different surfaces. Then the materials are sorry, I'm going a little fast. This is a terrace showing how the rainwater flows. We did one of the terrace where we use the system of 2x2 grid, and everything came out of that 2x2 grid, the entire furniture and structure that shades. I don't think any kind of roof could have hit this dome. Neither this. We did one of the project where we tried to do some. It's a 300-year-old wooden elements from a structure that has been restored into this place to create a weekend house, and everything is perfect about it in our approach, except if you see it's a conventional brick and concrete structure with fake columns and beams and all that. But it looks like something like this. There are some more images of Ladakh where you expect something and you find this inappropriate locations.
The last categories are shorter, but the idea of imperfection is also that we feel that in striving for things that are perfect or perfectly aligned or well put together, sometimes we miss a lot of things. And that's really the story in all of these observations through the occupation and the imperfection, that when we see much more, when we open and are not trying to find what we think is the best, we often surprise ourselves and find unexpected results, and that's what we're trying to incorporate into the work.
So this is a occupied category where we are saying that I mean, we design buildings, but once they get occupied, the spirit of occupation takes over. And so then if you have to read the existing scenario and try to understand what you could have done better, this is kind of an exercise into that. So these are the terraces decorated so beautifully with these mosaic tiles, which are also continuing here with the backdrop. No matter what the place is, when the people occupy it, it becomes different in spirit. So we try to have our own joke of how to occupy one place in Mumbai. And so this existing carpet floor, we kept it, and we created these fins as a reflection to Mumbai colonnades. That's one of the drawing. More images of how the buildings are taken over by the occupations. That's one of our project where how these different way of occupations and different orientations created the idea that throughout this project, because of the changing brief and family size whom we are designing it for, the facade kept changing, and so it created many different ideas. And finally, we built that was something like that without any of those arches. If you see, the facades are morphed and completely, put together differently because of these graffiti arts.
This is a project where we looked at the relationship of the structure to the way that people occupy it. These are load-bearing concrete panels, so it's a very regulated occupation where only a little bit can be done, so the balconies are very clearly occupied and the corners are extended. Whereas when you have frame structures and also lax regulations, then you have much more possibility, and you start to see in the same kind of a building a very different kind of occupation that expresses itself on the surface.
So we tried something with frames in one of our project. The idea is that someday it will be taken over. These are very small size of shops, about 140, and we hope that it will be taken over. This is a very different way of occupying, something that seems so conceptually stark, because the way it is painted, the form, the way it comes across is totally different. And so is this idea of, we call this idea of landscape, the way the hay is collected and put in the landscape. It creates a totally different atmosphere. This is one of our small terrace project, which is occupied by peacocks. This is, again, a very adventurous place in Himachal, where these people were sitting on the edge, which normally we wouldn't do. This is one of our another project where we are showing construction and how it's occupied. It's another fish market in Santiago and a mosque in Srinagar. Occupied. The art, the way it has been occupied. So we try to celebrate the idea that once people occupy, the structure should take the backstage. We try to create something that would be a backdrop and be. So we've created this project. This is the last category. We're talking about decaying, which is about how these buildings fall apart, and therefore how we should learn to bring them together. So this is this stepwells, one of our project where we created this green wall. These are the brick ceramic kiln in Morbi, which are every few years they have to rebuild them because they fall apart because of the extreme heat. These are a few other facades, stone slab falling apart, and some parapet walls which are made of clay, they're falling apart. And some other ways of structures getting decayed. How the existing places are modified in the process. We try to create something where this is one of our projects where we did this landscape installation, which was later on was called Coffins of the Designer's Ex-Boyfriends. And then we had, so this is another one where we can see how it's falling apart, the materials getting exposed, the parapets falling apart. We did this another project where we did the flooring outside, where we told the guy, we saw that there was a lot of fossils in these stones, and so we told the guy that we want to restore something with that, and so we kept them aside and we made this mural that we call it a million years old landscape. This is kind of epitome of how something is taken over, not just decayed, but taken over by nature, and it falls apart or grows into something else.
I think in all of these, we're at the end, but in all of these, we're really interested in looking at the way that things decay, the way that they're occupied, the things that happen after we're part of them, because we think that says a lot more about what we need to do to make, but it's also just a much more interesting way to be looking at the world, not to be always trying to imagine an ending point that is stationary, and I think that's what we first thought of when we're thinking about photography as the pause or the moment, but we're trying to understand it. We're really using it as a tool of documentation of moments so that we can see what the future is or what's happening in the past, and that sort of connects us to the larger trajectory of the landscapes and the context that we're working in. That's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ira.